I personally don't believe in coincidences. If you stumble across this video, then I think there's a really good chance that you're meant to be here. This video is for anyone who is in a season of life where nothing seems to make sense anymore. Maybe things have started to fall apart in a way that you can't seem to comprehend, or it feels like your life is sliding backwards and things that you worked so hard to achieve just seem to be slipping through your fingers day by day. We're going to talk about it today, and I want to tell you my story, and I want to talk about some of the reasons that this might be happening to you and what you can do to get yourself through it and come out on the other side feeling sane and feeling like your life hasn't entirely fallen apart. Hi, my loves. My name is Deandra Nicolette, and on my channel, you'll find everything and anything that I feel called to talk about. And I'm super excited because I've taken a little break from YouTube, but I'm back. And in coming back, I feel like I have such a powerful message to share about why I was gone and what happened during the last 4 months. Grab a snack, grab a cup of water. I seem to have misplaced my cup. So I will be sat here dehydrated and not hungry though, because I did have a breakfast sandwich before this. Let's get cozy and dive into today's video. I'm going to break this video up into a couple different chapters, if you will. In the first chapter, I want to title this one Stillness and Struggle. So, a few months ago, I was living in Dallas, Texas. I lived in Dallas for the last about 4 years. I've recently moved back to Boston. We'll get into that in a second. But when I was in Dallas, that last couple of months, this was actually the end of 2024, I was in a season of what I would call stillness and a little bit of struggle. I've been at my job for about 4 years, and this was a job that actually allowed me to move to Texas in that it was remote and it paid me enough for me to move across the country from the Northeast to the South of the United States. I'd worked really hard to build what I felt was a life that showcased everything that I had dreamed of in Texas. I was working remotely. I felt like I was making good money. I'd worked really hard to grow and cultivate this community in that space. And I was living a life that I was like, okay, this is kind of cute. Like, I kind of like this, right? But in the last couple of months in Texas, I started to feel this sort of unease. If you were in this chapter and season that I've talked about, perhaps leading up to it, you felt this sort of unease. I knew in my heart that my time at my job was coming to an end. Now, if you've ever been laid off or fired or just lost your job in some sort of unfortunate circumstance, you might have experienced a time where intuitively leading up to it, you felt like, okay, this chapter low key might be closing soon. I got to figure something out. And that's what I had started to feel. I remember I was receiving this message from God that my time at that company was coming to an end. And so I started to apply for jobs. Like, when I tell you guys, I was applying for jobs left and right. I actually set specific goals to apply to a certain number of jobs every single week. And I was out here trying hard to land a new job before I felt like this door that I knew was going to be closing soon closed on me and sort of left me out in the cold. But as seasons of stillness goes, nothing was happening. In your season of stillness, it could feel almost like you were doing a ton to either gain clarity or have some sort of forward movement, but nothing is moving. It's almost like God is asking you to sit down and chill out. And I'm the kind of person where sitting down and chilling out is not exactly my forte. I like to get up, I like to move, I like to take action. But in this season, I was being called to, yes, have faith that this chapter is closing, there's something else coming. But at the same time, this is not the time for you to be actively trying to do the most and trying to almost force your way into a new room, a new door, if you will. There was this feeling of wanting to move forward, knowing, like I said, that something was coming, but also at the same time feeling the urge or feeling the call to sit down and sort of relax. And in those moments of stillness, all you can really lean on is your faith. Because when it feels like something is closing, when it feels like a chapter is ending, when it feels like something is being wrapped up, you almost start to panic. You start to fear, especially when it's something like your job that's related to your livelihood, obviously insecurity and money. You feel this need to react. And in the seasons of stillness, what you're being called to do is lean on faith. And instead of reacting out of fear, you're being called to react out of faith. And reacting out of faith often means, if not always, to sort of relax and know that all will be handled in the way it's supposed to be handled. This next chapter, I want to title And this is where the story gets interesting. So 2025 comes around, and this is where I had set the biggest intentions to move into a new role, to change things around. I ended up in 2024 realizing that certain things in my life weren't working and they weren't aligned with where I wanted to be in life. I was overpaying for the home that I was living in. I was not happy and satisfied at my job. I was feeling stifled creatively because when I'm not happy at my job, it seeps into other areas of my life, specifically my desire to create content or just create in general, right? Whether it be baking or sewing or writing or making videos. I stopped creating because I was going through this season where I just felt so stressed. I almost felt like I was at my wit's end. I knew that God wanted me in another role, but I didn't understand why it wasn't working, why I was going to interview after interview after interview and not landing a job. 2025 comes around, and actually, right at the end of 2024, I hosted a party with all my girlfriends in Texas, and I said, let's get together and let's talk about what we aim to call in and cultivate for 2025. I remember my word of the year for 2025 was emergence. And I chose that word specifically because it felt like in 2025, the energy that I was being called to step into was one of the butterfly emerging from the cocoon. Cliche, yes, I know, but that was the energy I was feeling. It was like I have been in this season of stillness, of cultivation, of preparing for something big, bigger than what I even know or understand is coming. And this is the sort of season or the chapter, the year where I'm being asked to, okay, emerge out of that cocoon and open my eyes to all that is possible for what God has in store for my life. February 2025, I remember it clearly because I was actually preparing to move. My lease was ending in my townhome, and one of the steps I decided to take was to downgrade my home. And I say downgrade, I feel like that sounds really negative actually. I found my dream apartment and it was a lot cheaper than where I was living currently. And so I wanted to move into a new home in order to have more room in my budget to save, to lean into, okay, I want to purchase a home soon. I want to, travel more. I want to do all these things and I need more income. Why don't I open up space with my current income by allowing myself to step into a smaller home that feels cozier and feels more aligned with where I am in life? My apartment was halfway packed up. My movers had been scheduled. I had switched over my energy. I had, called the internet company and let them know where I was going to be moving to. Everything was done. I'd even dropped off the check for this new apartment at the office that weekend. Everything was in order and everything was moving. And it felt like, okay, this is going to be my new chapter. It's a new year. I'm going to be in a new home. It's going to be fresh energy. And I'm so excited. The following Tuesday, I had a meeting set with my boss. And I remember having a nightmare that weekend where I was told I was losing my job. And I remember telling my mom about this nightmare. We were like, okay, let's not think negatively. I'm probably just overthinking. It's probably just him wanting to, get together and talk to me about goals for 2025. So I try to keep it positive. I try to keep it light. I allow myself to not step into those negative thoughts. And I walked into that meeting, I worked remotely. So I literally like showed up to the, the Zoom, but I showed up to the meeting with as much positive energy that I could muster. Within the first 30 seconds of the call, I was told that I was losing my job. What I find most interesting about that moment, because I remember it so clearly, is that in that moment, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel disappointment. I actually felt relief. I felt like I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't realize that I'd been carrying such a heavy weight. And in that moment, it felt like poof, it was gone. And I get off the call and I call my mom and I call my friends. I don't think consciously I registered it, but I think on a soul level, I knew that this was divine. I knew this was divine intervention. If you listen to my podcast, Manifest Daily, one of my first episodes I did years ago, and it's not lost on me the sort of pattern of this, or not pattern, but there's something there. But one of the first episodes I did years ago, I talked about how my first ever job out of grad school, I was at this agency. I ended up realizing how toxic of a work environment it was. And I ended up deciding I'm going to leave this job because I, again, felt that like God was like, you got to move. You got to get out of here. This is not for you, or it's not for you anymore. I actually got fired from that job. And I walked out of that job that day physically because it was an in person job. Okay. I walked out of that job that day feeling like a weight was lifted from my shoulders, feeling like this is the dawn of my new beginning. This is the door opening. This is a door closing, yes, but this is also a door opening. And it's up to me to see that. And that was actually so pivotal to so much of my journey because it was around this time that a couple years after that, actually, I think it was 1 year exactly after that is when I decided to start my podcast. And that set into motion a chain of events that have changed my life so much for the better. It's created opportunities for certain connections, for certain knowings, for certain opportunities that I never would have seen had that door not closed and had I not proceeded to do what I did next. Getting off of that call, I felt that feeling. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what this is leading to, but I'm going to trust it. I'm going to trust God. And I don't understand it because I have been applying for jobs. I'm in the middle of this move and this is my livelihood. I don't understand, but I'm going to trust it. Things moved really quickly from there. And I think this is a testament to the power of divine intervention. I was laid off from my job on a Tuesday. By the next day, and again, I'm like omitting a lot of the story because there were so many conversations, so many journal entries, an emergency therapy session. By Wednesday, I decided that instead of moving into my new apartment in Dallas, I would move back home with my parents. One of the goals that I set for 2025 was a really lofty financial goal. And in doing so, it meant that I was going to have to really curb my spending. When I looked at the full big picture, I realized that this was such a massive opportunity. If I stayed in Dallas, yes, I could live and I could look for a job and I could stay there as long as I could until, things got really tight and I could come back home. But I also realized that I could not move in to that new space. I could move back here, that it was such a privilege. I don't come from the healthiest household, but having a household that I could go back to with parents who would let me stay with them for as long as I need to while I get myself back to a place that feels sturdy and stable, that is a blessing, and one that I was able to thankfully realize in that moment. I called the movers. I told them, we're not moving to an apartment anymore. We're actually going to move some things into storage unit. I called a company to pick up my car. I bought my mom a plane ticket to come to Dallas to help me. I called my friends and I said, hey, this is happening. It was so quick. I remember on the Friday when my friends came over to help me pack, they were like, I can't believe you're leaving. It was like whiplash, but it was also a moment where I was like, this is literally God in action. Like, you can't deny it. The way everything lined up in such a way to allow me to move with quickness, you can't deny that it was divine intervention. The way the movers were able to move me, the way they gave me such a massive discount when they heard what happened, the way the car people were able to fit me into their extremely tight schedule to ship my car on the one day I needed it to be shipped, the way the apartment said, we're not going to charge you for breaking a lease because we understand, which is kind of big because these apartments out here sometimes, girl, they don't play. They be wanting their moolah. But they were like, no, we're gonna work with you on this. You don't owe us anything. You're good. So I was laid off on a Tuesday. By the following Monday, I was moved back to Boston. I want to say it was 2 days later, if not the next day, I had a job interview. I actually had a couple of interviews lined up, but I had a job interview that ended up turning into a second interview, that turned into a third interview, that turned into a fourth interview, that turned into a job offer 3 weeks later. When I sit and think about this, I realize the power of this story. I have been in Boston for about 2 months now. The amount of things that have happened to me, the amount of breakthroughs, the amount of realizations, the amount of aligned relationships, the amount of blessings that I've experienced in 2 months has showed me that I am being moved for a reason. I am here for a reason. This was no accident. This was not a failure. This was God setting me up for something that I still don't understand, but I am choosing to trust. It's crazy because I think in those moments where it feels like everything is falling apart, where it feels like it's a whirlwind, you can almost sort of get caught up in seeing the chaos of it all because you're in it. And it's not until the dust starts to clear a little bit that you realize, oh my God, everything that was being uprooted to make space for what needs to be planted. Everything that was being uprooted was a weed. Everything that was being uprooted was not meant to be here anymore. And that's okay. Not everything is permanent. In fact, life is about impermanence. Life is about change. Life is about learning to be adaptable and to have faith in the process and the chapters and the unfolding of your life, even if you don't understand why things are unfolding the way they are or what they are unfolding to become. I remember when I came back, I was looking for a therapist, and one of the first sessions I had with my new therapist, who was literally so amazing, is talking about how I felt like I was moving backwards in life. I was back in my parents' house. I was back in my hometown. I took a bit of a pay cut with my new role. I felt like I'm about to be 31, and what do I have to show for it? Growth isn't linear. And that's one of the things that you have to remember is that it's not linear. Sometimes it looks like you are literally moving backwards, but I always think of that cliche story of the arrow being pulled back in order to shoot forward. Sometimes it feels like you are being pulled back into things and situations and environments and places that you never thought you'd be again. But in fact, what's happening is you are being set up to be propelled into a new environment, into a new situation, into a new chapter that you never even imagined the heights of. The other day, I actually felt called to redo my vision board. The message I received was that I've been dreaming way too small. In moving back to Boston, in landing this new job, in unfolding these relationships, in having these blessings come through with a swiftness that I never could have imagined, I'm being shown that my understanding of time and my understanding of how things can change and how things can unfold is a very human and basic understanding. God doesn't work on human time. He doesn't work on your time. He works on the time that he works on. And the time that he works on is divine timing. Your life can change overnight. You can be blessed overnight. You're sitting here thinking that it could take you a year, 2 years, that this move backwards means that it's going to take you 5 years to get to where you were before, or 10 years, or whatever amount of years. You could move backwards, you could regress. And everything can change in a year to put you in a position, in a place that is so further along than you ever were in your life, than you ever were before. You know what I'm realizing, guys? I'm realizing that I never turned on the lamps. Hold on a second. Let me turn the lamps on. I can't believe I've been filming without the lamps. Hold on. Okay, that's much better. I wanted to have the lamps on to create like an ambiance, and I just noticed in the viewfinder that they literally weren't on. I'm so sorry. I want to leave you guys with a couple of points, a couple of takeaways. Also, now I'm out of breath because I just like ran to the lamps. Stillness is not stagnation. There are times in your life where God will pause you, God will force you to rest so that He can prepare you for something else. If I didn't have that moment of stillness, that moment of rest and pause before everything unfolded, I fear I would not have had the energy, like literal physical energy, but also mental and emotional energy to endure all of the changes that have unfolded in my life so quickly. Your season of stillness is a blessing. Your season of stillness is here to help you understand. Your season of stillness is here to help you gain clarity. What do you actually want? The second thing I want to remind you of is you are not moving backwards. Growth is not linear. It's, you know what I mean? And so there are moments where it's going to seem like you are taking a step backwards. There are moments where it's going to seem like you're failing. But I would say the true mark of failure is falling down, feeling like you want to get up again, knowing you want to get up again, but staying on the ground out of fear. The only way that you ever fail in life is when you accept defeat, when you accept that you cannot try again. If you get up and you try, like, I don't care who sees you trying, you need to try. And I feel like that's the other thing is like we have this fear of like being seen trying. I have this fear of being seen trying. And the last thing I want to leave you guys with knowing is that it can change fast, it can change very, very quickly. We have this way of understanding time as humans. It makes sense. We put things on certain timelines. We say it's going to take me a year to save this much money. It's going to take me 2 years to do this, 3 years to do this. And it helps. It helps to set goals. It helps to quantify things. It helps to put things into perspective. But like I said earlier, God does not move on human time. You can think to yourself, it's going to take me a year to do this, and you can be moved in such a way that it takes you a month to do what you thought it was going to take you a year to do. I've been here for 2 months, and when I tell you, it feels like I have lived a full year in Massachusetts with the amount of things that have happened, the amount of breakthroughs I've had, the amount of things I've learned about myself, and I've learned about who I am and what I want and what I'm doing, the clarity that I've gained. It has been a full year of life. It's a whirlwind. It's a lot to take on, it's a lot to comprehend, but it's also proof that God moves fast, time moves fast. You have to keep that faith. You have to know that even if it feels like things aren't unfolding in a way that you understand, that everything can change quicker than you know. So again, for anyone that feels like things are unfolding in a way they don't understand, there might be a reason for that. I want you to keep the faith. I want you to know that growth isn't linear. I want you to know that things move fast. And I want you to know that your stillness doesn't mean that you aren't progressing. It doesn't mean that you aren't growing, and it doesn't mean that things aren't changing, even if you can't see it or understand how. I really hope you guys enjoy this video. And again, sorry the lamps weren't on. They'll be on for the other videos, hopefully, if I remember. And I appreciate you guys being here. Please feel free to give this video a thumbs up. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel. I'm looking forward to all of the content we'll create here together and getting to know you guys more. So thank you for being here. I'll chat with you soon. Bye.